Hi, my name is Charlie. I've been working here at WoodWerks for almost 17 years, and during that time I've been helping people with finishes and giving them advice based on my experience. And my experience goes way back. I've been doing this for almost my entire life, finishing. As a matter of fact, I remember at 9 or 10 years old, I was, started experimenting with finishes in my father's workshop. And back then, there was just a handful of finishes that were available to the general public. And in this particular shop, I have linseed oil, shellac, and paint. And this was before there was dryers, synthetic dryers. So the paint, you would paint it, and it would never dry. So, I asked my father about this, and he says, well, you have to add the linseed oil to it. It has natural dryers in it, and that helps it cure. But through the years, the coatings industry has gone through a lot of changes, experienced a lot of innovations that are extraordinary, especially in the last 10 or 15 years. And if you are researching typically online for the right finish for your project, with so many options out there and so many choices, it's just, it would make your head spin. So here in front of me, I have 4 such finishes, and we're going to try these on 4 different species of wood, of hardwoods. This is hard maple, this is cherry, this is walnut, and this is red oak. And what we're going to notice here, I'm going to start with the oil. There's a combination of 3 types of finishes here. There's one that's evaporative, which would be the shellac. There's one that's reactive. In other words, it needs to react with oxygen to polymerize, to cure. And in most cases, with a reactive finish, that usually takes 3 to 4 weeks. So, if you use an oil-based finish, you're going to smell that off-gassing coming off your piece of furniture for about 3 weeks. But that takes about 3 weeks. It'll dry overnight, and you'll be able to touch it and move it around, but it'll off-gas for 3 or 4 weeks. Shellac is an evaporative finish. It's alcohol-based. Once the alcohol evaporates off, what's left is the resin. And there's no curing process involved. So that's evaporative. Both of these are shellacs. This one has been processed and refined, removing the wax that normally and naturally comes with shellac. I can go into the history of shellac, which dates back centuries to Egyptian times and how they discovered it in India and how they processed it. We won't go into that. This here is a water-based finish. It's a polyacrylic. It's a combination of evaporative and reactive. So it's commonly termed a coalescing finish. But this dries in a couple hours. It's mostly water. Once the water evaporates off, what's left is the acrylic. And it also has urethane resin in it, just like the oil base. And there's glycol ethers that are used to soften that resin to allow it to remain in an emulsive state in water. So that part of it takes a little while to cure. In other words, about 2, 3, 4 weeks. So part of it takes a while to cure, the rest of it just evaporates off of it. It's mostly water. So you can typically, on a piece of furniture, apply 3 coats in one day and use it the next day. But for the surface to be totally hard and completely hard to its maximum hardness, it'll take about 3 weeks. So what we're going to do, we're going to start with the maple, start with the oil-based, and apply a coat. And what you want to look at is, as this is applied, some of these will reveal some of the hidden features of the wood that you normally wouldn't see. It's going to highlight, and you hear, if you get on the website and says, well, this finish pops the grain. Well, that's what we're going to look at here. So we're going to put a little bit of this on the maple. And you can see it's not, you can see the difference, okay? You can see the difference. It's coloring the wood just slightly, but not a whole lot, but you can see a lot more of the grain pattern. Cherry, you're going to see a change in color as well. Now this is really bringing out, you know, a different species of wood will react differently to different finishes. But you can see this. You can see some of the characteristics really becoming evident through that application. Kind of darkens the wood a little bit, and you can really see some of the flare in there. Walnut too, it will really change the color of walnut oil finishes. And there's the walnut. And as that ages, it'll, you know, the oil-based oil products will accelerate the aging processes on woods like cherry and walnut. This, within 6 or, you know, a year or so, will turn a golden brown, really beautiful color. And then oak will be similar to cherry, but you can see some of the early grain patterns really becoming evident here on the oak. You can see the difference here and here. So this, the darker grain patterns there, that's called the early growth. That's when this tree really starts taking off and growing in the spring, you know, and it really expands quickly, and that's what that early growth is. The growth in between that is a little denser wood. That's a latter growth. So you can see in oak, there's quite a contrast there. Now with the shellac, you're going to see similar effect as you did with the armor seal. Now this armor seal, by the way, by General Finish, is a high solids finish. This finish you can use on flooring, steps, tabletops, anywhere, and it's highly durable. It's a wipe-on finish, meaning it's polyurethane that's thinned with mineral spirits and tung oil. And that tung oil is really nice in this because urethane by itself leaves a really plastic, synthetic look. The tung oil in that kind of softens that a little bit. But anyway, that's that. So this is the de-waxed shellac. I had a little too much coffee this morning. I'm shaking a little bit. So that's a de-waxed shellac. This isn't going to highlight quite as much. I'm going to put a little bit on all of this. And then there on the cherry, on the walnut, and on the oak. So you can see, if you don't want to change the color of the wood too much, but you still want to highlight some of the grain pattern, this is a good choice. You can see that it's not changing the color at all. Or if it is, very little. On the cherry, on the other hand, you know, really takes, you know, it really does highlight a lot more, similar to the oil-based. Same with the walnut. But the nice thing about the shellac is that it's compatible with all finishes out there. You can put anything over it, and you can put it over any finish, usually. It has a little trouble with some of the lacquers out there, though. So there you go. That's the de-waxed shellac. Now we're really going to change the color of the wood here. This is orange shellac, and this was commonly used in, you know, in the early 1900s for trim work, for you know, baseboards and things in the housing, flooring, all the way through the 30s and 40s and 50s actually, but very, very common. That's the amber shellac, and that is not de-waxed. It has the natural wax from the secretions from the lac bug. But you can see this is really going to change the color of the wood. On some pieces, on some species, it might not be so desirable, but on others, like this cherry, look what it does to it. I mean, it really brings out a lot of color there. And this has the effect of aging the wood. You see this color here on the walnut? That's what walnut begins to look like after about 20 years. You know, so you can kind of cheat a little bit and add a little orange shellac, or I mean amber shellac to it to kind of speed that along. And there it is on red oak. But you can see now that it's starting to dry, some of these finishes are drying, you're seeing some of the differences there. But this is exceptionally striking on the walnut, the differences here. And how this looks, I mean, it's just starting to look like an age. Now, the water-based will go on, this particular one is not like the water-based polyacrylics that you purchase in the paint stores or the big box stores. This is a high resin, has a high percentage of urethane resin in it. And it dries, when it dries crystal clear. You know, there's no, the less expensive stuff is, will dry with a little bluish tint to it. You know, but this is absolutely clear. As a matter of fact, you can use that over any one of these finishes here. So, for example, if you wanted to change, you wanted the walnut to look like this, you can apply the shellac to it, let that evaporate off and it dries. It usually dries in a couple hours, it's ready for finish, and you can put the water-based over it. And people will tell you, no, you can't put it over wax shellac. Well, I've been doing it for 30 years, so go ahead and do it. And they also tell you cannot put it over an oil-based finish. I've been doing it for 30 years, so just do it. You just, with the oil-based finishes, you just have to let it dry off gas for about 3 or 4 days, and then you can put a water-based finish over it, and you'd have no problem at all. If you rush it, what happens is that if it's still, you know, really accelerating its off-gassing and, you know, its curing process, and you put a finish over it like this, those gases cannot escape. So they remain under the finish and you get a clouding effect. So, but if you let that finish dry, and you put it over oil-based stains too. So, but been doing it for a long time. Okay, now this is, like I said, now if you look at it here, it's a little milky in color. And it'll go on a little milky, but as it dries, turns absolutely clear. And this is really a nice, if you like the color of maple and you want to preserve that really bright color, you can see the difference. I mean, it does bring out some of the grain pattern, but it's absolutely clear and does not bother the color of the wood. So that's very nice on walnut or on maple. On cherry, same thing. If you like preserving that color of cherry, you know, the unaged look, there's cherry. So it's not changing much, but it does help bring out some of that grain pattern. It's the same thing on walnut. I have a lot of customers come in, well, I don't want to change the color of it. I don't want to, so I go right to this. You know, so I love this color of walnut and I want to keep that color. So always go to this water base. And the same with oak. You see how the early growth is beginning to pop a little bit there too, but it's really not changing the color of the wood. So there you go. There's 4 different finishes. Now, like I said, there are hundreds of finishes out there, but these are the most common ones. And just stay informed. You can typically rate the quality of a finish by its price. The higher the price, the more resin that's in it, the more durable it's going to be. So don't go cheap. You'll regret it in the long run. But anyway, this is it. The point of this exercise, by the way, is to impress upon you the importance of trying things out. You know, there are no set rules in finishing. You know, people will come out and say, I always use urethane for this. I always use lacquer. Or I always sand at 220 grit. There is no always in finishing. The always is for painters. You know, I prime, I paint, I'm done. You know, there are no, it's not, you know, you need to try things out, you know, and experiment. But here at WoodWerks, you know, we're willing to experiment with you. So thank you.